Today I want to share the story of James and Sarah Channels and their daughter Franny. James and Sarah are my 3 times great-grandparents. Sarah Amelia Jones was born in Mosquito Town, now known as Terrigal, in 1855 to William and Catherine Jones. William Jones was the first white settler to go to Jones Island on the Manning River, where the Lower Manning factory and a very large settlement was located by the 1920s. He went there for cedar in the early days, and the island was named after him. James Channel had been born 5 years earlier in Gosford to William and Sarah Channel. No S on the end, and in some instances it's spelt CHEN. In 1871, at the age of 16, Sarah married James, who was 21, at Brisbane Water. They had one of those miraculously short pregnancies, and their first daughter, Sarah Jane, was born 2 months later in October 1871. 2 more children, James and Thomas, were born on the Central Coast before James turned his attention to timber getting and was one of the first pit sawyers to come to the Nambucca River around 1880. He cut timber for some of the first houses built in Maxwell and in Bowraville also. When Sarah relocated to the Nambucca River with her husband and young family, she was known throughout the district as a very capable obstetric nurse. She nursed the mothers of hundreds of Nambucca's young population and had the distinction of not losing a single mother in all of the cases that she had. James and Sarah's family continued to grow while they were living in the Nambucca Valley, and between 1883 and 1895 they had 6 more children: John, Edward, Clara, Francis and Eliza. James and Sarah moved to Coffs around 1913, where she nursed at Urunga and Coffs Harbour with equal success and care. Sarah passed away aged 83 in 1928. Her obituary told a really sad story. Sarah Amelia Channels, the wife of Mr. James Channels, died under tragic circumstances on October the 4th. She had been an inmate at Coffs Harbour Hospital for 3 days. She'd recovered sufficiently to be discharged and was dressed and ready to go home. So excited did she become at the thought of going home again, where her aged husband had been ill for some time, that it proved too much for her and she fell back onto the bed dead. About 15 years prior, the deceased came to Coffs Harbour and had been a highly respected citizen ever since. She possessed the hardy constitution of the pioneers and suffered very little illness during her lifetime. She'd been ill for about 10 days before her death, and it was the first time that she had ever been in hospital. A very active woman for her age, she was often seen walking about, and few anticipated that her end was so near. Her husband, who was 77 years of age, had been so ill that it had been thought that the wife would easily survive him by years. Memorial notices over the coming years shared how much Sarah was loved and missed by her family. Loving and true in all her ways, upright and just to the end of her days, loved in life, honoured in death, a beautiful memory is all we have left. From her son Jim and daughter-in-law. In loving memory of our dear mother Sarah Channels, dear mother, you are not forgotten, though on earth you are no more. Still in memory you are with us as you always were before, inserted by her loving daughters Franny and Sarah and sons George and Sid. And finally from James, God is good, he gives me strength to bear my heavy cross. 'Tis he and he alone who knows my loneliness and loss, inserted by her loving husband James Channels. 7 years later, tragedy struck the family again with the passing of James and Sarah's daughter, Frances Stanton, aged 47. Newspapers reported that Mrs. Frances Stanton, wife of Mr. Harry Stanton, passed away in Coffs Harbour District Hospital last Friday at the age of 47 years. She was a robust, healthy-looking woman whose life one would be willing to take a lease on until about 6 weeks ago. She then entered the hospital as a result of heart trouble, but had improved so much that she was expected to return home within a few days, when a blood clot shifted to her lung and caused pleurisy. Frances and Harry Stanton were well-known residents of Coffs Harbour, having resided on Caramba Road for the 15 years prior to her death. Frances is buried with her parents in the same plot. A few short years later, James was to pass away in December of 1938. His obituary stated that Mr. James Channels, another of Coffs Harbour's oldest residents, passed away in Coffs Harbour District Hospital at 11 o'clock last night, aged 87 years. On Sunday week, he had a bad turn, and the next day he was admitted to hospital. At the time of James' passing, he left a family behind of 5 sons, 3 surviving daughters, many grandchildren, and 14 great-grandchildren. One of those great-grandchildren was my grandmother, Ida Evelyn Duffy. The mould growth on James, Sarah and Franny's headstone was quite significant, so the product I'm using is called BioShield, and it will work slowly over the next 6 months. I'll do some reapplications and we'll see it lighten right up. It's a beautiful headstone, and it's just to the right as you enter the first Anglican section of the Coffs Harbour Old Historical Cemetery. I'll share some updates as it lightens up over the next few months. Thanks everyone. Till next time. Bye.